So last campaign diary that I did, which was 6 days ago, I complained that we didn't play for a month, and now we have done another session in 6 days. Sometimes that's where I'm at. Sometimes if we can do a session like every 2-3 days, I'll do it. Other times I am flat and I don't have anything prepped or anything, so I like having the longer periods. But at the moment I've got stuff ready, I've got stuff happening, so it's sort of just like, come on, let's get into it. So speaking of, let's get into the campaign diary. So we played last night on Tuesday, not on Wednesday. Tonight I have a social engagement that I'm going off to, which should be a lot of fun. So we got together and played. This is session 12 of Ascension. Once again, I have my campaign notebook with me here. There was a lot of interesting stuff that happened. Mainly, this was probably the most roleplay we've done in a session. We only had one combat encounter, and it was sort of towards the end. We sort of pushed a little later than I initially intended, but sometimes that's where you're at. But things did wrap up sort of nicely, so let's talk what exactly happened. The classic start that a lot of people use, I think I learnt this from Matt Colville, but the classic is to begin where last we left our heroes. So where last did we leave our heroes? Well, we had Emilia Daciana and her butler, Salvatore Crowther, arriving at the apartment of Corvus Black. And they had just killed one of the Oliver Twist-esque orphans that Corvus seems to be so fond with, and Ferox appeared again. Of course, at this stage, there were a lot of questions. What the hell happened to Ferox? What is going on with the Daciana family? And why was this orphan suddenly killed? So naturally, Tull was irate and managed to spear tackle Salvatore Crowther, who had gone to pick up Ferox under the orders of Emilia. Crowther showed an amazing feat of dexterity and strength in which, whilst he was doing a fireman's carry of Ferox, bringing him into the apartment and getting spear tackled by the massive Tull, who now has 20 strength, very exciting. But he was able to sort of move and manipulate Ferox's body in so that he was put back onto the street, feet first, as he was sort of barely maintaining his consciousness. So Tull spear tackles Crowther, demanding to know why the orphan was killed. There's a bit of tension as Emilia sort of keeps on repeating that we can just go inside and talk. And they eventually managed to sort of settle down. Tull has his first use of Revivify, in which he revives the orphan who was killed just seconds before everything sort of happened, so that was nice, and the orphan very quickly ran away after Corvus yelled at him, not in his typical sort of fancy southern accent. It turned into more of a hillbilly, "Run, boy!" So, not sure what's going on there. It's probably just stress though. But so the orphan got away, and they eventually headed inside to talk. Now, I've very much based these two characters, Emilia Daciana and Salvatore Crowther, on a couple of sort of classic storytelling archetypes. We have the sort of seemingly useless butler, I was thinking Woodhouse from Archer, who is exceedingly skilled and capable, but often overshadowed by Archer's sort of general terribleness. And then for Emilia Daciana, I was sort of thinking of a classic femme fatale, someone who is exceedingly beautiful and extremely dangerous. I think one of my players said that they were imagining someone sort of close to Alexandra Daddario, which is not a far off guess from what I was sort of picturing myself, but you know, whatever works. So they headed inside, they had a discussion. Emilia explained that the killing of the orphan was a simple test to see if the party was strong enough and powerful enough and capable of completing this job that she had for them. There was a sort of a weird level of not quite flirting, but her and Corvus Black exchanged a few sort of backhanded compliments and sort of strange remarks. She sort of did a classic pointing up and down, and she remarked that, "Oh, this appearance is nice. Is this one new?" And Corvus sort of chuckled, assuming that she was talking about the tailor, and of course that's what she's talking about. But she proposed a simple job in exchange for information. She is aware that the party is trying to figure out what happened at Innsfield and why this town of 100 or so people was massacred by a group of werewolves, and she believes that she has information, and the party knows at least that the Daciana family was involved somehow, and so she has offered to give them information in exchange for dealing with a problem that they are having. So the Dacianas run the Golden Moon Casino, and at the moment there has been some sort of shape changer that has been causing some issues, posing as various employees, doing a lot of winning, more so than the average person would be able to do, and also having stolen one of their books. Of course, being a business, you would hope that their books would be legitimate, but it seems that if they are this desperate to get them back, there's probably something going on behind the scenes, some strange money stuff, but the important thing being that the party was promised information and they sort of eventually agreed to do this job. Now, during this time, Ferox was sort of fading in and out of consciousness. He was repeating one name, sort of muttering it over and over again. Carius, Carius, Carius. He was sort of halfway between sobbing a lot of the time and also just generally in shock, and he was finally able to explain what had happened. He explained that tieflings are very magical, sort of traditional creatures, and that there is this powerful blood magic that ties the tieflings together. So when the eldest male in the family dies, their blood is sort of drawn out and congeals into a pearl which contains sort of this magical properties, life essence of this tiefling and the sort of the bloodline of tieflings in the family. This pearl is then passed on to the eldest male, the next oldest in the family. So when a father dies, it's passed on to the oldest son as a sign of recognition of sort of their new role in the family, and it is also used to give the greater tiefling community the power to call upon this person if they need to fight for their family, which is customary in tiefling culture when settling disputes. In Ferox's backstory, he was driven out of his home by his family and by other tieflings because of his wild magic, and as he did so, he stole his now late father's pearl so that his younger brother Carius would not be able to be called on by the family in order to fight. Now, unfortunately, Ferox hasn't really been keeping in touch with his tiefling family. However, at some point recently, Carius decided to defend an elf that some other tieflings he knew were hunting. There's sort of a strange culture amongst the tieflings in Pogan, which is where Ferox and his family come from, in which they sort of seem to be very violently aggressive, which you can understand why, but they seem to enjoy hunting down sort of elves and humans, much like people would normally hunt a deer, for example. So obviously the tiefling community looked down upon Carius's attempt to defend this elf. They saw it as sort of manipulation and corruption because of the eldest brother, and so Ferox was summoned, well I say summoned really, he was teleported from where he was, from the morgue, and he was sent back to Pogan in order to settle this blood dispute. As is customary, Ferox was made to fight 4 other tieflings in order to save Carius's life. Now he was able to defeat this first one, but unfortunately this is sort of a hand-to-hand trial by combat, physical sort of prowess kind of thing. Now he was able to defeat the first tiefling, but unfortunately, because this is sort of hand-to-hand combat and magic is seen as dishonorable in matters of settling blood feuds, Ferox's wild magic tripped. When this happened, the other 3 tieflings that he was going to fight, as well as the wider circle of tieflings that were around and watching, decided to bum rush him. Unfortunately, the use of magic in these sort of matters is seen as dishonorable, and they saw this as Ferox deliberately trying to sort of cheat his way out of fighting honorably. And because of this, some very bad things happened. Ferox, first of all, he lost his dominant hand, as is customary, as a representation of losing his sort of dominance and control over his family. He is, of course, the dominant male, and he is supposed to be the one to discipline and control the rest of his family. But also, his brother was then killed. Carius was executed. he was decapitated in a very, very poorly constructed guillotine that was used, and this was sort of further punishment for both Ferox running away from home, for stealing his family's pearl, and sort of just for generally being weak. And then after that, he was returned. After the blood feud is settled, the Tiefling is sort of teleported back to the sort of general area where they last were, often near their sort of closest companions. So fortunately, he was returned safely-ish to the party, but now he is missing his left hand. There is nothing but a stump. Ferox, of course, was in shock. He was sort of in a rather extreme emotional state, and as he was telling this rather tragic story, it was interrupted by Emilia Daciana boiling some water in a very old-fashioned kettle that made one of those really high-pitched whistles. I'll see if I can... There's probably a whistling noise or something in there, which really sort of... It didn't sit well with Ferox, naturally, and his wild magic flared again. It very quickly evaporated the water that she was boiling. She said that she was uncomfortable and wanted a cup of tea, which is, of course, not really appropriate while someone's telling you this very tragic story. While this was happening, Salvatore Crowther, being the classic butler and seeing the sort of state of Corvus's apartment, it was very messy, he had begun sweeping, tidying it up, and cleaning around. Emilia described the job and explained about the shapeshifter and what was going on, and sort of finalized the details. After a little bit more flirting with Corvus Black, they left, they departed. Ferox immediately passed out once again. He had several levels of exhaustion from the trial, and he needed sleep desperately. The others also went back to sleep. It was like 1, 2 in the morning. It was quite late, and they were able to sleep and begin the day feeling a little more fresh. From there, they headed into the city proper. Emilia Daciana gave them business passes so that they could enter into the main part of the city. There is a sort of very tight control system in place for allowing people into the sort of casino district. You need to pass a credit check. Usually it's about 10,000 gold to sort of ensure that you have money, and also because it seems that House Ergon and the sort of other dominant political figures just don't like the poor because, well, money makes the world go round, I guess. So they waited in line for a couple of hours. They had to go through custom. As they entered into the casino district, they realized that someone had done some sort of strange lighting enchantment, so it was always nighttime, and the vibe was just generally swinging. It's a casino, of course. Everyone's going to be having a lot of fun. There was a drow scalper sort of towards the front gate who was trying to get the players to go on a tour for just a simple 50 gold, and after one of the players, I think Ferox, remarked, "Oh, I thought they didn't let any poor people in," the paladins quickly saw this gentleman who tried to run and was very quickly spear tackled and arrested. There's a lot of spear tackling going on in this session. I don't know, it's fun. But as that happened, they were met with a couple of the casinos, with the Golden Moon Casino, the casino owned by the Daciana family, and the Lucksmiths Casino, which was owned and operated by the House Ergon. They headed into the casino. Tull did a bit of gambling, which was sort of a little strange. I think he was trying to just see what the fuss was about, and very quickly lost what he betted. He was then recognized by a couple of dwarves from House Karg, who Tull remembered as being part of the same group that came to Orlane during his sort of period of downtime, because Tull has sort of been able to convince a bunch of dwarves in the Underdark to sort of follow and join his sort of crusade for Saint Gaed the Confessor. The dwarves had a meeting set up with Lord Milvio Daciana and Lady Valletta Daciana, and Tull was able to sort of join. The dwarves seemed to be a little nervous, and the meeting itself seemed to sort of go fairly uneventfully. They were trying to broker a backdoor alliance with the Daciana family, and they were not keen on it. The Kargs don't have too much power and influence, unfortunately, at least in the surface world, and so the Daciana family were not particularly keen. Meanwhile, on the casino floor, Corvus, Ferox, and Bell were wandering around the casino, sort of checking out the vibe, the games, and everything. They were trying to play some slots, some blackjack. There were pool tables as well. Ferox and Corvus were not able to win much money, unfortunately. Bell was able to get a couple of hundred gold just from sort of stumbling around, pretending to be drunk and sort of stupid, and sort of very good at pickpocketing people who were unsuspecting. During this time, Bell noted that there was an elf over by the sort of pool table area that seemed to be consistently winning and making lots of money. And then as this elf sort of moved over to the slot machines, Ferox noticed that as this elf was sort of talking and making noise and everything, that his lip movements were not matching what was coming out. And Ferox, of course, he studied at the Royal College of Sorcery. He took history lessons on how to identify extraplanar beings, and one tip that was given, it was sort of a history class and then a how to hunt kind of class, and one of the tips that was given was that often extraplanar beings are not able to communicate sort of normally. Instead, they have telepathy, and often they will try and pass off as sort of natives by trying to mirror lip movements. Of course, if you don't really know the language, it's hard to pretend like you're really speaking. As Ferox remembered this, we went back over to the meeting with Tull and the Datiana family. The dwarves had left as the Lord and Lady had requested Tull to stay and have a drink with them. There was sort of an intense moment as Lord Milvio seemed to recognize Tull once again as the hunter, and Tull noticed that Lady Valletta had begun to sort of not develop a rash, but he heard her sneeze once, and so Tull, sort of being the courteous man that he is, he sort of leaned in and he said, "Not to worry, I will not harm your wife." And sort of not thinking that Lord Milvio himself was also a werewolf, and to which he snarled, showing his sort of canine teeth in a very threatening manner and saying that would be a mistake you would not wish to make. And they sort of very quickly resolved the tension because they seemed to know that Tull was part of the sort of force that was trying to deal with what he revealed was a Slard. Now the Slard are actually, I've got minis for Slards. There are these giant frog sort of creatures that come not from the material plane, but from elsewhere, from the primordial plane, I think it is. Is it primordial? I'm not sure. I'll look it up. But they're not from around here. They are wholly alien aberrations. And as this was mentioned, Tull sort of had an oh shit moment and very quickly ran downstairs. Now back downstairs, as Ferox made the connection between the sort of bad lip movements and the general strange vibe about this gentleman, he presumed that this is probably the shape changer that we are looking for. He went to confront him, and I think he went and he sort of put a hand on his shoulder and said, "I know what you really are." To which Ferox heard just a single voice in his head, which shut out all other noise. And it was just a maniacal, crazy laugh. The sort of laugh you have when you've been up for 60 hours, you haven't had any sleep, and you're sort of going a little bit loopy. And as this happened, he saw the form of this elf begin to bulge and change. There's also a lot of shapeshifters in this current arc. It's fine, they're really cool. And as this happened, this elf turned into a Death Slard. Looking around the casino, they noticed that there were two other sort of elf-human-looking things, which also turned into these large, hulking, brutish red Slards, and there seemed to be an archer who very quickly pulled out a bow and sort of looked like he was getting ready to also fight. And so there was a fight. We had two red Slard, we had one Death Slard, we had an archer against the 4 players, which they were able to, it took a while, it was a good lengthy combat, but they were able to emerge successful, and that's where we ended the session. So there was a lot of stuff happening here. A lot of interesting things. As I mentioned, Tull got his first use of Revivify. Those of you that are familiar with the spell would know that Revivify requires a diamond, a 300 gold diamond, or maybe it's diamond dust. It's something, it's got a component that you sort of need to have. So when he did this, I explained that, well, this is your first time, so we'll presume that you have the diamond, but if you want to use it again, you are going to have to go out and buy some more diamonds, in which he was agreeable to that, and sort of in a very quick thinking roleplay moment, Tull said to Amelia that she owes him a diamond, and so Amelia gave him 2 diamonds, which would have been very exciting for the party, having 2 free diamonds, 2 free Revivifies, but then Tull went and sort of lost them immediately when he went to play blackjack, so it's not ideal, but also like they can just go and buy more diamonds if necessary. It's not too much of an issue. There's obviously a lot of drama going on with Ferox at the moment. He does not have his hand. Rules is written in 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. You need to have sort of 2 free hands to do spell casting. One to either hold your material focus or your component pouch, and then one to do sort of the somatic gestures, but I thought that would be kind of mean if I've taken one of my players' hands, who's also a spellcaster, and said you can't do your main thing now. So instead what's been happening is that his wild magic is just going to be sort of proccing more frequently than what it normally will. We're using a homebrew rule for the sorcerer in which the wild magic number starts at 1. So when you roll to see if your wild magic occurs, if you do not roll a 1 and it doesn't occur, that number then increases. So then it goes to 2 and 3 and 4 until it eventually, like, it will trigger. And at that point it then resets back to 1. And so now what is happening, that instead of increasing just by 1, it is going to be increasing by the level of spell that he has cast. So he has access to 5th level spells. He used Polymorph on Corvus Black at one point to turn him into a T-Rex, which is a 5th level spell. So his wild magic number jumped from 5 to 10, I think, and then it triggered the next round of combat after that, just to sort of represent the extra effort, the additional sort of stress on his body that is sort of occurring with him being unable to sort of properly cast his spells. I was toying with the idea of maybe having a certain chance that his spell would fail or it would fire off in the wrong direction, but that's sort of, it's in the same vein as like critical fail sort of tables where if you roll a natural 1 your sword breaks or something, and I'm not really a big fan of that. We're using misfire rules for the guns, but that's sort of because they're primitive technology, they're sort of prone to failure, and they do such a high damage output that there needs to be some sort of downside for, you know, potentially misusing them. So as I said, Ferox's left hand is now missing. If you know, you know. If you don't, you'll find out soon, potentially. But that's pretty much the session. There's a lot of stuff that's going to be happening in the next few sessions. The sort of tension is going to be ramping up a little bit, so I'm really looking forward to all of that. I'm hoping we can play a little more consistently, and I think COVID rules are changing so that we can have 10 visitors on, I think, from Sunday, from Monday, so we might even play in person. I can use some of these minis that I have scattered around everywhere, which will be really cool. But aside from that, we are still looking at Lost Mines of Fingal Flangle Flingle Flap Phandelver. So we'll be doing a video on that soon, looking at the town of Phandalin and how to sort of use starting towns, villages and everything. Some good tips, some bad tips, or I guess some do's and don'ts is a better way of thinking about it. Thank you so much for watching. You can do the usual stuff. You can send this to your grandma, to your granddad, to your third cousin who you only see at Christmas time. You can share it around, like, blah, 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 all of that stuff. You know what to do. And I will see you guys some other time.